Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Dee. How are you?
I'm okay. Looking forward to this little discussion here. Hi, Lynn and Jill. I know she's there somewhere.
Yes, Jill is there.
You know, Jill, your name is misspelled, but I don't know how to change that.
I can see if I can change it.
Morning. It's spelled right on my screen.
It's Buter on mine.
Oh, you're right.
There it goes. The L is now there. Hooray.
Lana, you're a genius.
Thank you.
No genius.
It takes a while to get the hang of Zoom, but I think after 2+ years, I'm finally there.
We're all getting plenty of practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be back in just a moment.
Okay, sounds good. We'll wait a few minutes for everyone to come in.
Morning, Adriana.
Morning, Jason. How's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. Hopefully I'll have solid reception here. I took the crew, we're heading up to the Marble Mountains for a botany trip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'll be on the road during this meeting here.
Okay, no problem. You guys are busy doing all the things, so.
Sure are. It's happening out there. Got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks everyone for hanging in there. Just take a couple more minutes. I was wondering who would be coming today. We have such a good presentation, but I know in the summer that it's also a time when a lot of people are off on vacation. So it might be a small group, but we'll be a mighty group.
Adriana, this is Lynn, and it's the first time I've called in on my phone because my computer's being repaired. So am I in? You can hear me. I can hear you and see you.
You're crystal clear. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Morning, Kim.
Good morning. Chit chat between you, and our mapping team.
We're in the final throes of grant writing. Ah. Always an exciting time.
Indeed.
Oh my gosh. Morning, Sophia.
Morning.
All right, we're just giving it a few more minutes for people to come in. And like I said, I know we might be a small group, but a mighty group.
My cat is upstaging me.
Gotta love cats and computers. I don't know why they're so magnetized to them, but they are.
He always wants to be the center of every conversation.
And I believe he's successfully become the center of the conversation. What's his name?
His name's Gregory because he's gray,
Oh,
and he's a Tubbs fire survivor. He lost half an ear and got badly burned in the Tubbs fire, but he's a cat with at least 9 lives.
wow.
Yeah. He's showing you his good ear. This is my good side.
Aw.
It's definitely a sweetie.
Hmm.
All right. Well, all right. I think maybe we'll get started. I know Kim is our official facilitator, but he is helping me with all kinds of grant proposal stuff right now. So I think he's going to be back in a few minutes. So why don't we just start on our updates? And the first person on my screen is Jill Butler. What's happening out there in the Gualala? And Jill, you are
Good
still.
morning.
Oh, there you are. Great.
Sorry. It's not the computer, it's the user that is sometimes a little slow. So Jill Butler representing Gualala River Watershed Council. We are doing reach monitoring up a couple miles upstream of the mouth. And apparently the flow is still good up there. There is some of the toxic algae there, but apparently comparable amounts to past years. From there, they'll be moving on and doing reach monitoring in Dry Creek and Pepperwood Creeks, and this is the Dry Creek that's in the Gualala watershed. We have hobo temperature monitors deployed in I think it's something like 20 spots in the watershed, and we won't have, we won't complete the temperature monitoring and have data till probably sometime next winter. And we're still awaiting word from the RCD on when we're going to start the Gualala River Collaborative Project, and maybe someone from the RCD will be here today and give us an update. That grant is federally funded, and it just seems to be taking forever to sign the contract. And that's it for us.
Thank you, Jill. All right. And I'm sorry, I'm not the right person from the RCD to tell you about the start of that project, but hopefully the right person will be in touch. All right, Lynn.
So up in the upper Mark West watershed, apropos to today's discussion, we're really excited that we have a vegetation management project that was funded through the county and Ag and Open Space to do, it's about 3.5 miles along Calistoga Road, either called a calming zone or a shaded fuel break, depending on the grant requirements. And so we have been out doing door-to-door meet and greets with the neighbors along that section of road, making sure that everybody's on board. And Sonoma RCD is going to get started with a bidders tour and getting close to getting that started, I think. We also, on the same topic, through TALS, had a CAL FIRE grant funded that is still in the contracting phase. So it's going to be a little while before it gets on the ground, but that has to do with a larger shaded fire break on the Diamond Mountain Upper Mark West border between Napa and Sonoma counties along a ridge top up there. So 2 different kinds of shaded fuel breaks, and I'm very interested to hear and learn more about what other people think those should look like. And then on a more local neighborhood level, we just did a really nice defensible space garden tour, so that now that we're outside of Zoom meetings, we could actually have people visit several of the gardens in our neighborhood area. So that was great. And then we're getting geared up for our annual summer potluck on Saturday. So it's wonderful. We have these grants really help bring the neighbors together. They really give us as a fire safe council and organizations credibility to say we're really here to help you and we actually have something we can do. So that plus the annual social, I think we're feeling really excited and enthusiastic up here.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you for that update. Awesome to hear so much is happening out there and people are meeting in person. All right, next on my screen is D.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm here representing Taking Action for Living Systems and Greenbelt Alliance. And I am also excited about the grant that CAL FIRE gave to the Sonoma Fire Safe Council. We helped write the grant and are included as a partner in some of the work. It will be managed by the Sonoma RCD, and Ann Baker, who you'll meet if you haven't already in a few minutes, is also a project partner, and she can go into that. But I think the most exciting thing for me is that it is a 2-county project. So it works in Napa and Sonoma. As the fires don't know there's boundaries, and we want to ignore them too. And so it's exciting that CAL FIRE, is willing to, look at this in actuality, providing this grant. And then I think you all might know that TALS is working with CLE, the Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment at Berkeley, to have a convening of some sort. We're still designing it to find ways of a larger financing, public-private financing structure and a governance structure, so that there is less uncertainty and there's more opportunities for collaboration and close connection, and to avoid duplication, and also to coordinate where all of our projects are going to be, and so that they can really increase the scale at which we're working. And I think I'll leave it there.
Great, Dee, thank you. Please keep us updated on how that all comes out. Great. And then Fred, you're next on my screen.
Okay. Dee, thanks for getting those projects going and working on expanding these examples at a larger level. That is really what we're trying to do all the time. And I'm just after a month of COVID, I'm back up and marking trees with out at Jenner, and we're trying to learn how to rebuild an old growth forest. And I'm working with NRCS on making biochar and what's the difference between a hedgerow and a shelter belt and a forest, those issues. And other than that, working a little bit with the JC, we're going to do some burning out there, and learning about taxes relative to catastrophes, if anybody wants to talk to me about that. Because when forests burn in federally designated disasters, there's a whole different tax structure that takes hold. Yeah, very excited about doing something on shaded fuel breaks here, because I'm looking at them every day, and I would love to know what makes a difference and how we can implement this stuff. So just on the ground for you guys. Keep going.
Thanks, Fred. I'm gonna take over on the facilitating for the rest of the day. I had to get my coffee. We've heard from Dee and Fred, and I didn't catch who was the first speaker.
Lynn.
Lynn, okay, thank you, Lynn.
And also Jill.
Oh, good, good. All right, so, and then I guess next is Ellie.
I sprained my thumb, so I have to use my left hand for my cursor. It takes a little longer. Okay, so representing the Sonoma Ecology Center, we have been in the midst of a bunch of workshops, a series of workshops in West County funded by Fire Safe Sonoma. One of them was a webinar back on June 1st, and we've had 2 site visits now, one at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. This is all about beyond the defensible space, so the sort of wildland vegetation management. We had 32 people show up at OAEC 2 weekends ago. Brock Dahlman led us on an amazing kind of Cocopelli tour through his 80 acres of forest management that has been ongoing for about 30 years. And I think the whole crew found it absolutely amazing. And we saw 2 spotted owls, 2 spotted owl fledglings. That was so fun because, you know, they've been managing vegetation so that the owls can actually get down and get to their prey, which are the dusky-footed wood rats. And then last weekend, Brianna Boaz took us on a tour of the JC 100-acre forest. So we've been seeing a lot of different versions of shaded fuel breaks. That was attended by about 22 people. And so then the last thing we're going to do is a webinar next Wednesday called what we're calling lightning consultations. So people who have attended and even those who haven't can come. A number of landowners will be presenting their issues. And then we'll have Mike Jones, Brock Dahlman, Sashi, and I'll be there. And we'll be helping landowners sort of think about what they need to do. So that's our series wrapping up next Wednesday. I can see if I can put a link in the chat if people are interested in attending that last one next Wednesday from 6 to 8. The Resilient Landscapes Coalition led the tour at Lynn Garrick's, the Upper Mark West. That was that garden tour that was really fun. So we were showing people how to, or consulting with people on how to do defensible space that's ecologically sensitive as well. So that was cool. And we're getting going on the handbook of best management principles and practices with UC Cooperative Extension and Pepperwood and Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, and Kim Batchelder is helping guide us, Sashi Sabaratnam. So we're just kind of getting the work plan going, and hopefully we'll have the handbook finished by sometime next June. So that's it for me.
Ellie, can I ask a question about the handbook?
Sure.
I'm interested in what input or updates you will be giving to the public, but certainly to the Forest Working Group, as everybody is, quite excited about having a handbook. But I'm hoping that you will be wanting some input, and that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. If it's not done till June, but we're compiling all this great information, can we get it out to people? And also, yeah, and you had 2 questions there. The second was, who are we going to be talking to get this input? So I'm happy to talk to you about it offline, but we have a list of experts. We're going to be reaching out pretty much to everybody on the Forest Working Group and other locations. Marin has done some of this work, so we'll be in touch with them. UC Cooperative Extension, but pretty much everybody that is already participating, and you'll definitely be in the loop, Dee.
Well, what about people that aren't so enthusiastic about treatments? Are you engaging them, I hope?
Well, you know the answer to that. Sashi and Caitlin and I and Brock and others are reaching out to that crew, right? The no touch people, is that what you're referring to? Where'd you
Yes,
go?
of course, and of course, I imagined that you had a plan for that, for that input, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
ask because I think it's a responsibility of all of us to engage with all types of people that have approaches that need to be heard, and from both sides, we need to educate each other. So that's what I was asking. Thanks.
I'm particularly sensitive to that question. And I used to work for the Napa County RCD, and I think that, there's no single block of people. There's just different individuals with different issues. And so I think addressing them individually is sometimes a better approach. And our project's not going to be a success unless we bring everybody in and incorporate all concerns. So,
Great.
yeah.
I think that's a great conversation. One of the things that our grant program was excited to see was the ability to focus on Sonoma County conditions. We have a really diverse habitat types from heavy fuel loads in Doug fir and redwood groves to oak woodlands in the upper Northwest to grasslands. And so we want to be able to provide a source that people can use that's based on local science, based on local practices, that's really supportive of the work that people are doing. So yeah, I think it's great to have that conversation. And one of the things I think is we're really trying to advocate for is doing site visits where we're on the ground looking at these things after, General Headlands has 5 to 6 years doing shaded fuel breaks, and we get a chance to see that in person and have that dialogue with landowners, show them how it's done. I think that's the nature of our grant that we're submitting and the type of technical assistance that we need. So I'm not doing a very good job facilitating right now. So let's move on to Jill. Sorry, we had Jill. I was going to go to Judy. Judy, do you mind giving us an update?
Okay. Well, we are going on
Judy,
Fort
you have
Ross
an
Road.
unstable.
We've started
Judy?
our shaded fuel break project. It's amazing. Yes.
Your
Can you hear me?
connection isn't super solid. I wonder, sometimes if you turn off your video, your audio will be more concise.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's a lot better.
Okay. Okay. We have started work on Fort Ross Road, and we're creating a shaded fuel break on 9.3 miles of major access to Cazadero, the ranches, Timber Cove, and the coast. The feedback has just been tremendous. We had a community meeting last week with Matt Green, our forester, and Marshall, which was well attended, to talk about, this is a one-lane road, and it's really affecting people's lives to have so much work being done. We have 2 crews working, one on the east end, 1 and 2 on the west end. So people can expect at least 15 minutes from each crew. So we had to address a lot of landowner concerns. That was very well attended, well received. We're planning our CAL FIRE grant project for another 7 miles of back roads, the dirt roads off Fort Ross Road. We'll be meeting with Marshall, Matt Green, and Sasha Burlman to look at fire, where we're going to do prescribed fire. So that's coming along. We also have a community meeting, an extension of the Sonoma Coast Collaborative meetings this Saturday, and where we will be creating pod units, taking the large pods that Marshall and Ella have created for the county and reducing them to smaller containment units within the communities here on the coast. We started that at our last meeting from the Mendocino border to Cazadero. We have North Bay, North Sonoma Coast Fire, Timber Cove, Fort Ross Road, and Cazadero Fire, who are working with us. Marshall and Ella will be leading the pod unit creations, and a lot of good community responses of
Judy, you're still
Can you
there?
hear me?
We missed you for just a second, but I think you're back. We
I'm
got the
having a
last part
problem, I
about,
think, with my internet connection because I can't really hear anything.
no one's talking other than me, and I was just suggesting that
I'm gonna
the
hang up.
last thing.
I'm gonna leave the meeting.
Okay. That sounds good. We'll see you soon.
I keep losing. I think my internet connection is.
All right, well, we'll keep going. Sorry about that, folks. Internet challenge. Next on our list is, let me see, Ann Baker, would you care to give an update of what you're working on, or do you want to hold off until we have our panel discussion?
Thanks, I can hold off until the panel discussion. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for attending. I appreciate it. So then Sierra, would you like to provide any kind of updates on things you've been working on?
Hi, all. I'm admin coordinator here at Ag and Open Space, and I'm just happy to report that we have officially executed all of the agreements for the 2022 cycle and the 2021 conditionally approved cycle of the vegetation management grants. So just lots of paperwork on our side, but yay, they're all done.
Yeah, Sierra has been our total rock star and helping us to get all those grant agreements in order and have the grantees sign off and the county sign off, and then get them some funding so they can do their work. So thank you very much, Sierra, for all your work. And then next I have Sophia. Would you like to report out on UC Extension?
Hi there. So I'm the cooperative extension in Marin, and I do stuff mostly focused on residential, not like the wildlands, but so doing a lot of education of homeowners and also trying to infuse some education, additional education with principal space inspectors and landscapers, and trying to get off the ground to get a pilot program for a landscape training program and maybe attach like a certificate to that and try and get our landscapers empowered to implement some of these principles when they go to properties. So that's my pet project that I'm going to be working on with Stephen Swain and others. And then I would say an associate organization of ours is Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority down here in Marin, and they have been making headway in a lot of different things. And I was gonna, they actually have I'm putting in the chat, this is a link to a Greater Voss Valley shaded fuel break that has gained some publicity down here and traction, and it might be of interest to people in this group to check it out. And you know, this meeting is actually going to be in person. I think they're going to have like a live kind of viewing webinar type of thing. I'm not sure if you can interact with the audience first virtually. More information is coming on that, but if you wanted to make the trek down and see what they're all doing and maybe kind of chime in, because it's a public meeting, so there are going to be people from both sides of yay and nay. So if you had additional voices to add to your experience with shaded fuel breaks, that would probably be something they would like.
Yeah,
How many
did you provide a date for that event?
It's next Tuesday evening, and it's on,
Tuesday.
if you go to the link, it says July 26th, 6 to 7:30
Perfect.
p.m.
All right,
So,
thank you very much.
no problem.
Yeah, that's really good information. Okay, next I have Joe Bauer. Would you be able to share what you're working on these days?
Sure. Hello. I'm sitting in for Shanti, although I see Brooke over there, so kind of curious that she. We see on the land trust side, we are setting up a number of treatments for our preserves, kind of in this fall, winter, into spring. So working with contractors on that, and then also exciting the Sonoma Valley Wildlands Collaborative, which is our partnership with the big landowners in the valley, has funded or decided to fund the North Bay Prescribed Fire Training Exchange that Sasha is setting up this fall.
Nice.
Which was the first time that at least I'm aware of, we're going to be actually able to offer some funding for people to participate as volunteers in the effort, rather than them having to not only donate their time, but also pay for that. So lining up a series of weekend burns, potentially 10 to 12 burning days and up to 300 acres is kind of our target, but we'd like to exceed that if we can. So getting some good fire back on the ground there. So I'm sure you'll be seeing more on that.
That sounds great. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. Appreciate you participating. Next, we have Brooke Edwards, please.
Good morning, everyone. Brooke Edwards with Regional Parks. And a couple quick updates. We did receive some funding from the State Coastal Conservancy to put in a 27-acre shaded fuel break on our Mono Rio Redwoods property. And so that would provide access from kind of Main Street of Mono Rio up to the west side ridge above the town of Mono Rio. That would be a shaded fuel break, and so it would provide access to firefighters, emergency responders responding to a fire to be able to get up to that west ridge, which of course is a strategically located area to fight a fire. So that's good news, starting to work on that property. And then the other thing is that we have 2 staff that are going to the Audubon Canyon Ranch Fire Forward Fellowship. And this is really a training program for folks to build their skills in planning and application of prescribed fire. It's really increased, I think, our local knowledge and local practitioners in the area of how to apply prescribed fire and use it as a landscape management tool. So we have a couple folks going to that program, and we hope to have some going there in the future as well, in future years. But we are trying to build up our knowledge base here at Regional Parks in terms of how to use prescribed fire as a landscape management tool. And so hopefully what you'll be seeing in the coming years is staff working with other fire agencies and ACR applying prescribed fire to our regional parks. So that's great news. And it's also great to hear that the Sonoma Valley has received some funding and can provide that TREX program that's going to be happening this fall. So if people can participate, I do recommend it. You're able to get in a variety of fires in a short amount of time and really increase your knowledge of how to use prescribed fire. And yeah, my wife Shanti is not here. She's up with our son Austin hiking the high Sierras, and so she gets to have all the fun. But that's it for me.
All right, yeah, taking one for the team, are you, Brooke? Thank you for that report out. And then final on our list is Jason Mills.
Hi, Kim. Hi, everybody. Yeah, we have been busy going at it. We're working not too far from where Lynn's projects are going on, and some of where Dee's talking about that Napa Sonoma line there. And we're doing 20 acres of thinning around a structure, ingress, egress, shaded fuel breaks, steep slopes, standing dead material, taking all that out for a private parcel up there. And then we're stepping into 65 acres on Saddle Mountain there, following some great EMP protocols that I'm sure Monica will dive deeper into. But it's been just a pleasure to carry out well-orchestrated fuel reduction work. And I just feel like I'm just going to keep doing everything I can to be a resource for Sonoma County. And I just feel like every acre we're able to kind of take on is an acre kind of spared of potential destruction. So, you know, the work can be good and can be bad. And thanks for like just having this conversation, everybody. Look forward to more.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing. And yeah, we're counting on Monica being able to share a little bit about Saddle Mountain and the work that's going on up there. So that's great. So good. I don't have the agenda in front of me. Adriana, what do we have next? Actually, Adriana, did you report out yet?
Oh, I haven't reported. And I would say from Goldridge, I am happy to be partnering with Kim on a proposal to bring in some funds to the Russian River tributaries of Sonoma County through NIFWIF. We won't know until next year, I don't think, about this one. It's a long waiting time, but it supports technical assistance to forest landowners and rural landowners with wildfire fuels management, forest management, erosion control, all for the benefit and protection of Russian River watersheds. So yeah, we're excited to be bringing more services, doing more landowner coordination. There's also a workforce training component that will help utilize partnering with the Sonoma Ecology Center to expand the knowledge of the handbook that they're developing, and working with other partners like ACR on getting more training on prescribed fire use and things like that. So there's a whole lot there. Sorry, Kim, if I just took everything you wanted to say in your update. But that's my biggest update right now, and I'm very excited about it. So yeah, I'll just leave it there.
That sounds good. Yeah, between you and Sierra, you've taken all my thunder. I have nothing, folks. But no, I really appreciate Adriana has been doing a bang-up job on helping us to put this proposal together. And thank you to all those we reached out to get letters of support. And it is very focused on Russian River. And so for those who aren't included, I apologize for that, but it really is hopefully something we can replicate with the work that we're doing through the Veg Management Program. And I have to tell you, there was, when I was sending out all these letters, I would to seek letters of support, I was just astounded by how quick folks reacted. It just like, it was really a proud moment to think about all the, just how we have each other's backs, and that, you know, something positive come into the county, the funding source is being able to support good work of the RCDs and what Ag and Open Space is trying to do. It was just a really, it's like you reflected back on why we do the Forest Working Group. In my mind, that's really that value of these professional relationships that we're working on all these different aspects. And I just really want to thank folks who have responded so quickly. And I think everybody sees the value of what we're hoping to do with this funding. So it is indeed another iteration of how the Veg Management Program hopes to support landowners throughout the county. That is trying to provide direct technical assistance to try to improve our ability to respond to fires and improve the overall health of our landscapes. So that's my update. Adriana, can you remind me what our next topic is, and I'll try to pull up our agenda.
Yes. I think at this point, I was going to give an update about our plans for, well, the plans that are shaping up for a conference for the Forest Working Group. But our conference team wasn't able to meet before this meeting, so I don't have concrete things, but I think it would be good to share with you guys sort of what we're thinking about. So there's a small committee that's volunteered their time to help us think through what a conference for the Forest Working Group would look like, either this fall or next spring. And we've been talking about something over a few days, potentially 2 or 3 days, with a kind of panel style day where we're inside having discussions on topics and doing a lot of back and forth between attendees and speakers in a facility. We've been thinking about Schoen Farm, and I think Brianna has been pretty supportive of that idea. And then the second day going out and doing site visits and field tours. The purpose of the workshop of the conferences we see it now is really talking about practical applications of knowledge that we've gained over the last 5 years on really practical projects, like what to do with excess forest debris, how to put together a successful chipping program, how to work with your neighbors, how to do planning. It kind of runs the gamut, and I've gotten a lot of good input from the planning committee on how we want this to shape up. I think we're still firming up what it looks like. We want it to be the most efficient and best use of everyone's time, and provide information on things that people, land managers have expressed an interest in. So we're still working on that. I am scheduling another meeting for us for, it was really going to be for next Monday, but I think Sashi is a important person on that team, and she had a conflict, so we're going to be rescheduling it. So if you are interested in attending and talking about that, just let me know and I can loop you in on the new date of our meeting. But yeah, hope to bring more concrete information to you all next month, and ask for your review of a plan. We're just not quite there yet, but yeah, does anyone have any thoughts or feedback about just the sketch that I gave right there?
One of the things that we talked about is a fall date versus a spring date. I think, is that one of the topics that we're going to address with the next conference planning meeting? Okay, great, thanks. I think the pros and cons that the fall, there's a sense of urgency. We want to get this people the information and have that dialogue. The con is it's a very complicated time as far as potential fires in the area, and having some of those key people like CAL FIRE on board to be able to support us. The pro on the spring side is we have a little bit more time, so that's something to consider. But it is a group effort. I mean, if anything tests our ability to work together is putting together one of our forest conferences, and we've done an amazing job over time, and we hope to be able to follow up and keep in that same line of expertise and quality.
Yeah, certainly. I wonder, we do have some time in the agenda before our panel begins. We could look over some of the initial thoughts about the conference if we wanted to, unless there's something else we could do for a few minutes. Kim, do you have any thoughts about that?
I think that would be great. I think we have set, 2 of the panelists won't be on till 11 o'clock, or yeah, that's right, 11 o'clock. So yeah, we have about 18 minutes to talk about our upcoming events and figure out who exactly is going to be leading various field events, as well as our upcoming brown bag sessions. We haven't done one of those for a while, so maybe you want to dive into that. Today's panel is part of a brown bag type of meeting, but yeah, Adrienne, you want to lead us through that?
Sure, yeah, we could start off with the brown bags. Just take me a second to pull up my notes. Let's see. So I think, yeah, exactly. So this shaded fuel break panel is one that we had on the table for a little while. For August, I was hoping to reach out to Susan Hayden for a presentation on the fire management decision support framework. I remember her saying that either August or September would be a good time for her. That is a tool that's been in the works for months now, and I think will be a really big support to all of us. I know earlier Dee was talking about just how do we decide what projects we are prioritizing and where, and what's our criteria. And I think that decision support framework will be really helpful in us deciding, what we're looking for. So hoping to hear from her in August or September. I also,
it does have a new name. It's called the Wildfire Resilience Planner. And it's a very powerful software that layers and layers on so many layers of data that can really help us to prioritize where we should be working, and the forest conditions, the type of natural resources that are there that might be sensitive to different treatments. And we intend to apply it for the Vegetation Management Grant Program and many others. And that's kind of the process that we're using. I've got a chance to test the beta level, and that's really a great tool.
nice. And it was called the Wildfire Resilience Planner.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be fantastic to learn more about. And then just two other ones that I have kind of sitting out there for this summer, early fall are a presentation on Pepperwood Preserve's scientific research on forest conservation. It's been a little while since we've heard from them, and I know their science moves so fast. I feel like we're all interested to hear kind of what is new over there. And it was a topic that was volunteered up last time we talked about brown bag topics. So that's on my list. I know the Pepperwood team is very busy, so we'll see if they're available. But yeah, and that also could become a field tour as well. I think Michael globally had made himself available for a tour for the forest working group. So I don't know if we would rather see a presentation, or if we want to like combine it with a field tour. Maybe we do both. But yeah. And
that sounds good. Can you give us a download on where we are with a tour of the Pacific Union College forest?
Right, so that one we had scheduled that twice for the spring, and the first time it was canceled just due to a conflict from Peter. He had a personal emergency he needed to respond to, and then the second time we had to cancel it just due to low registration. And so I guess I know Lynn, you wanted to make it but couldn't, and so yeah, I've been wondering with him when we should reschedule it for. I know Napa Angwin is kind of far out there for people, but I also know that they're doing a lot of cool stuff, and I think it would be great to see. So yeah, I'm not sure when we should reschedule that for.
I guess it's really on the group to decide if we. I think it's certainly very valuable to see that type of work on the ground, and he's done an amazing job.
Oh, we lost your audio for a second there, Kim.
Oh, sorry.
I can hear you now.
Testing.
Yes.
So I think it's on the group to figure out whether we want to pursue that, if that's something that's valuable.
Just to chime in on Peter's behalf, guys, it gets very hot over at the PUC this time of year. So I would imagine he'd at this point want to push to the fall. And I think the real value of that trip would be to see different fuel trees, because he's doing a lot of heavy chipping now in the forest. and you can kind of see the result of that. So I think it would be interesting to see different methodologies and treatments. And then he's also been struggling to get fire in the ground there. And so it's an example of, you get these burn piles in place. Now, how do we actually burn them? And so I think it would be educational for that regard too.
Great, thank you, Jason, for reporting on that. Does anybody else have any other priorities, or did we cover the list that you have, Adriana?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Do we cover the list that you have right now as far as potential brown bags?
Oh, the other one was hearing from the North Coast Resource Partnership about their funding they have available for technical assistance, developing and writing, so developing projects and writing proposals. That is, it has been advertised as really assistance for low income disadvantaged communities, and of which we, not everyone in our community is eligible for, but I think it would still be interesting if you guys want to learn more about that and see if there are opportunities to work down here with them. I remember talking to Catherine Gledhill and she sounded pretty supportive. So yeah, I thought it might be nice to have them come and talk and explain to us what that kind of support means to them.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great idea, because I know that Judy Rosales has received funding from them, and I don't know who else has been working with them, but their responsibilities from here to, I think, to Oregon. So it's a large area, and I would think they would be competitive, but I think they're also looking for people to support. So that would be great to get a little bit more insight from Catherine.
Great, and then that was my last one. So if there are new ideas of what people would like to hear about at Brown Bags, please let me know.
Just checking in on the Brendan O'Neill brown bag field trip. And I believe we had agreement to change that to 17 September. And I just want to confirm that with everybody, that date is still up and viable. I'm just firming that up with Brendan at this time.
That's the date that I have. So that's a Saturday.
That's the date you have. Okay, so that it'll go all the way through to brown paper tickets from here.
Yes. We're giving you guys
Good.
plenty of time to put it on your calendar.
The other thing I'd like to bring up is that as we're talking about topics to discuss for either brown bags or for the larger conference, as we'll call it, is that wildfire planning is great, but after a wildfire goes through, there's a second wildfire potential. And I don't know if I'm calling it the fire after the fire, or everything burns twice, or fires don't burn trees, they just kill them. But I think that's a subject we want to look at along with wildfire planning, like post-wildfire planning. How do you reduce your fire danger even after you've burned? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great idea.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Fred. We have a number of different properties that have burned recently, of course, and lots of resprout, lots of things growing back. And so now we have new vegetation, but we have the old dry skeleton still standing, and it will burn again. And so what to do in those situations? It's kind of a new condition that we're trying to struggle and deal with, see how to address that.
I also would like to hear about these sprouting trees that are becoming bushes, and what are we going to do to recreate them or help them become trees again? And I also have heard people talking about that, and I think we all know that trees don't always burn so that they aren't useful, if you would. And so they can regrow, and yet, what is a dead tree? What is the definition? So those are things that come to my mind.
I would second all of that. I think the whole issue of post-fire restoration is really important up here after the glass fire. in particular, and also after the Tubbs fire.
Yeah, the open space work we've been doing has been all about what do we do after the fire, and our answers are all over the place. And I think it's just part of the, you know, I say I'm planting old growth marking over on Jenner. Yes, we are getting the timber harvest is happening, but we have to start aiming our forests to where we want them to get to, starting the day after the fire.
Yeah.
And so once we figure out what we're trying to do on any given parcel, we kind of need a series of recipes to manage it up to that level.
I think it's a good conference topic.
Absolutely.
I was gonna
Growing old growth, starting with zero.
Go ahead, Jill.
This is Jill kibitzing that it is a conference topic. It's post-fire restoration is one of our panel.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you,
For the
Jill.
conference. And yes, as everybody is commenting, it's a really critical one, and it's well, and all these panels, we haven't done any work yet on what what we want to address within those large topics and who we're going to have address them.
Right.
And I'll just also kibitz that there's no way this conference is happening this fall. I don't know why we keep even mentioning that as a possibility. We've done all the
Thank you for that.
Thanks for the reality check.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's perfect, Jill.
available, and yeah, and maybe June.
All right, good. That's thank you for that reality check. I appreciate that. You know, regarding the restoration thing, I think Fred's right that we are all over the place as far as the treatment, but that's dictated by how the fire burned across Saddle Mountain or these other landscapes. So it doesn't burn consistently. It doesn't. The type of forest is dependent on what kind of treatments, if you do a treatment, or if natural resource regeneration is going to happen. One factor I wanted to roll into that is Arthur Dawson has been doing some phenomenal work on looking at the historical fire regimes and what are happening across California. And he's going past the kind of logical CAL FIRE history of fires and looking and trying to document where other fires occurred between kind of the prehistoric times and management via various indigenous groups. And then what we're starting to see once different practices like trying to convert redwoods to pasture and things like that. So these are all practices that make this moment of time that we're seeing today and what our landscape looks like. But where do we go? What's our baseline about when is our forested systems healthy and ways in which they're more resilient to wildfire? Like those are some of the really critical questions that we need to try to address. All right, so we're at 10:56, and I think we have Ann Baker on the line, and Jason Mills is on the line. We're waiting for Marshall and Monica, and we also have Brook. So maybe we start with a quick introduction. So how we're going to run this panel, we would like to have each panelist give like a 5 to 8 minute intro about the type of work and their experience in shaded fuel breaks. And we've given them a list of a number of different questions like, how do you define a shaded fuel break? What are some of the key purposes in your mind? And maybe let's just start with Ann and have you provide your sense of the importance of shaded fuel breaks and how that works. And then we can go to Brook, and if Marshall pops on soon, we'll have him speak, and then Monica just showed up. So this is great timing. Does anybody have any questions or things that they want to bring up beyond the panel? Okay, so let's launch. Ann, are you ready to speak?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I come at this as a landscape architect. I've had the been lucky enough to work on a number of fuel management projects and also work on projects having to do with cultural fire and cultural native indigenous cultural uses of plants. So I see shaded fuel breaks as a place where we can do a lot of things in one part of the landscape. And so they provide an opportunity to kind of do a major piece of the puzzle. Like we're trying to learn how to manage this whole landscape to reduce fuels. And so shaded fuel breaks, you know, give a community a place to start. You know, they can have multiple objectives and they provide a place for fire control and bringing, you know, crown fires down to the ground and reducing high intensity fire. But what I particularly like about them is that everyone seems to really be able to grasp what they are and then increasingly envision what they should look like and how we should manage them and how they become part of our landscape fabric and our community fabric. I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. I appreciate that introduction. Marshall, would you like to go next? And basically, we're asking each panelist to give kind of a 5-minute intro about what types of shaded fuel breaks you've been involved with, some of the important factors that you think are part of this question about how do we apply shaded fuel breaks across our landscape?
Yeah, so Marshall Turbeville with CAL FIRE. I guess something unique about shaded fuel breaks is, in addition to doing them now, you know, mainly with a lot of the grant funding and doing them ahead of time, is a lot of my fuel breaks are done during a fire, which are not planned, a little more destructive. So I really look at what the whole purpose is here of a shaded fuel break. It's to reduce the intensity, reduce ember production, so they have value in your homes and where we want to stop or slow a fire. They have value if we want to do prescribed burning, and we could talk about pods and other boundaries and other efforts out there. And then really, I think it just mimics what natural fire would have historically done. And I look at some of the catastrophic fires we're having now and why we're having them. And it's because essentially there hasn't been shaded fuel breaks been done culturally or through allowing natural fires. So that's my experiences. A shaded fuel break is just the definition, the treatment. It's so hard to describe how to do it sometimes. I think we all agree on the conceptual terms, but you got to kind of sometimes look at the end state, like 50% canopy cover, but maybe it's only 20% now. And obviously in grass, there's no shade anyway. So we're really talking about brush underneath trees, grass underneath trees, some type of grass. Shaded fuel break and brush, I'm not so convinced it's effective or useful, but it does break up continuity. So there's just all these variables. And I guess the predominant lens I look through is my imagination, my prediction of how a fire is going to burn, and how effective is this fuel break going to be? Is it just too steep of a slope, too thick of vegetation? You know, all those variables in it. And then I've also been able to do some prescribed burning in shaded fuel breaks as a maintenance tool, and Brooke knows about this and can talk about it. So, you know, that's just my perspective. Happy to be here today and answer questions. And my emphasis is to do as much as we can before an emergency, then during and after. I think that's what makes a difference. And shaded fuel breaks are one of those treatments. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Marshall. I really appreciate that intro. Monica, would you like to share your experience?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Delmartini, Stewardship Specialist with Ag and Open Space. I manage our Saddle Mountain Open Space Preserve, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a 960-acre wildland preserve just northeast of the city of Santa Rosa off Calistoga and St. Helena roads. We just completed implementation of 2 shaded fuel breaks on the preserve, totaling about 2 miles. One of them is on a paved road that's a private road, but it's used by quite a number of residential folks on both sides of the preserve. That's Plum Ranch Road. And then the other is along a dirt road that runs through kind of the middle of the preserve. Chief Nichols from CAL FIRE reached out to us a while back, expressing his interest in seeing a shaded fuel break and other fuels treatments, particularly along the Plum Ranch Road corridor, as an area that had been identified by CAL FIRE as being potentially strategic in the event of a wind-driven wildfire in kind of the zone between Calistoga Road and Los Alamos Road, which, as we all know, actually happened in 2020. We were on the phone the week before the fire hit. So the implementation of these fuel breaks has been after the fire event that we were anticipating in theory, but that Plum Ranch Road area was utilized during suppression activities as a place to do a firing operation to protect some of the residences off of Calistoga Road and in that part of Rincon Valley. So even in its untreated state, that corridor was effective and strategic. We saw an opportunity because we had already identified these areas as places where we wanted to do fuels treatments for a number of reasons. We had overcrowded conditions, we had ladder fuel conditions that were concerning and hazardous, and we also had the risk of a forest type conversion away from a pretty diverse oak dominated hardwood stand to Douglas fir. We had just really small diameter Douglas firs encroaching the understory of these areas. So we already knew that we wanted to get in and do some mechanical treatments and follow that up with prescribed burning. But this was really an opportunity to kind of join forces to reach our own forest health and biodiversity and ultimately prescribed burning objectives, support CAL FIRE's regional strategic plans, and also, again, particularly along the Plum Ranch Road corridor, to support our neighbors' ability to use that route for evacuation in a wildfire scenario. I am happy to talk more in the course of this discussion about how we developed those prescriptions kind of within the mission of our organization and nuanced those to be protective of understory biodiversity. But I think that's probably a good introduction and someone else can take it from there.
That's great. Thank you, Monica. That's a really exciting project and a lot of people participated. So thanks for facilitating, coordinating all that effort. Brooke, would you like to share where you're working these days and maybe how you got your start with the shaded fuel break model?
Sure. I'm Brook Edwards. I work for Regional Parks, and of course, I'm focused on forest management and fuel reduction, application of prescribed fire. I've been with Regional Parks for almost a year now, but prior to that, I was the regional director over at the Jenner Headlands. And so over on that property where we have about 3,100 acres of coniferous forest, we put in 130 acres of shaded fuel break work. And then we also worked with CAL FIRE and Marshall to begin applying prescribed fire as a maintenance, further reduce the fuel loads in those shaded fuel breaks, but then also as a maintenance component. As trees resprouted, particularly the hardwoods, we could apply prescribed fire to those areas that would knock them back, that would reduce the fuel loading that was on the ground. And so we've done that over at the Jenner Headlands, and then now at Regional Parks, I've worked on about 30 acres of shaded fuel break work in our Shiloh forest. I'm also active in the Good Fire Alliance, and I'm on the steering committee of the Good Fire Alliance, and so been on a number of prescribed fires. And so just in addition to what everyone has talked about in terms of the importance of the shaded fuel break, you know, we really look at it as breaking up that horizontal and vertical continuity of fuel loads. Ideally, you know, these shaded fuel breaks are placed on a strategic ridge line. Fire likes to move uphill, and so placed on a strategic ridge line, this gives CAL FIRE firefighters an area of reduced fuel load on the top of the ridge to fight a fire directly, or perhaps set a backfire to try to extinguish some of the fuels before the approaching wildfire reaches up in that area. And like Marshall said, you know, we can be proactive and put in these shaded fuel breaks on these ridge lines. That gives CAL FIRE that tool to use in the case of a wildfire. And if we're not able to do that before a wildfire, they will put those in during a wildfire. So, you know, if we can plan these, set them up the way we want them to look like, and do maintenance, it really provides a great tool for CAL FIRE and all the firefighters. Also want to point out that, you know, it's a good way for communities to work across property boundaries. So just putting in a short section of shaded fuel break on your property does not have all that much effectiveness, but if you can connect it to your neighbor and your neighbor can connect it to their neighbor and you can have a more continuous shaded fuel break, that's really where, because we'll have these continuous shaded fuel breaks throughout different regions. And these are areas where CAL FIRE will be able to respond to wildfire. The other thing that we're really looking at in terms of the importance of these is to use them during the application of prescribed fire. And so these shaded fuel breaks can be areas that are can serve as control lines when we use prescribed fire. So we really believe that in order to kind of get our fuel loads across these landscapes back in some kind of balance, reduce those fuel loads, one of the main tools and the important tools is kind of reintroduction of fire on the landscape. Many of our landscapes are fire adapted, and they've been lacking that for over 100 years. So by putting in shaded fuel breaks up on the ridge lines, maybe along the mid slope, you have an area of reduced fuel load. You can use that as a control line, and that helps set up what we call these burn units, where we can burn in between these shaded fuel breaks using fire to further reduce the fuel loads. And so that's another important component that we're looking at across regional parks to set up these shaded fuel breaks as control lines so that we can use prescribed fire. So those are basic summary that I have on shaded fuel breaks.
Go. That is really great. Thank you all for providing that. And do you want to kind of revisit that question about kind of how you got into shaded fuel breaks and how what values you've really seen this on the landscape? What has been your specific role, do you think?
Yeah, thank you. You know, I just want to say that I really have been enjoying working with Taking Action for Living Systems with Dee, and working with the Diamond Mountain Upper Mark West group and Lynn, and that's kind of been really an amazing experience over the last 2 years. And we just got a fire prevention planning grant from CAL FIRE that's really focused on creating 3 shaded fuel breaks, and one is going to be along Sharp Road, that's kind of on the border of Napa and Sonoma counties. So it's really connecting the 2 counties, and that's been an interesting interplay, and it's brought a lot of resources and ideas to the process. And also kind of includes some roads that go down, Cardam Canyon and Diamond Mountain Road go down into Napa. And then also the ridge line, the Diamond Mountain Ridge line, and hopefully the Kings Hill Ridgeline as well. So, so in that area, we're really looking at these shaded fuel breaks as an opportunity to bring a number of neighbors together to create more of a landscape scale fuel break that provides opportunities for prescribed fire and management together, and allows people to kind of tie their efforts and resources together. A lot of the efforts up there, you know, as Lynn mentioned earlier in this conversation, you know, both the Tubbs fire and the Glass fire have gone through the area, and it's been really difficult for neighbors to, you know, they've been working so hard to come together and address these landscape scale issues. And lots of times the first place and the easiest place to address it is along the roadways. But it's much harder to get people to work across kind of the back fence in a way, and kind of across the county boundaries, and really start to get to these large landscape scale issues, which is where we're trying to get to, you know, is to get to the forest stewardship over 10,000 acres or 30,000 acres, this whole Upper Mark West watershed. And so what we're seeing is that, you know, in the role that TALS has been playing in this process has really been kind of catalyst, you know, cheerleader, supporter, you know, bringing resources, really trying to support the fire safe councils and their development, their ability to collaborate and state common goals and common visions, which help bring people together, which are kind of this essential glue, you know. But I think what we're seeing with this grant that we recently won is an opportunity to actually think about this larger landscape in kind of key pieces and how we could start to imagine, plan out a forest health grant to start to be able to do this larger scale management. And so I think we'll learn a lot when we do the shaded field break planning, and then we'll learn a lot more, as we get neighbors to work more with each other and kind of share their vision. But it's really like, this is kind of just a great, piece of the puzzle, kind of a glue piece of the puzzle. And so it's been a great opportunity to work up there.
That's great. Thank you very much, Anne. Marshall, I'd like to direct this question to you regarding how easy has it been to work with landowners? We've been successful in seeing some great work on public lands, such as regional parks and ag and open space. But one of the challenges, like Brooke pointed out, having one neighbor who's not convinced that this works, what do you think are some of the kind of telling methods that you've used to get neighbors to participate, or maybe what are some of the barriers that you run into?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's essentially two approaches. One approach is the government or fire department says, hey, we want that ridge to be a strategic location, like the pods method. The other method is it comes from the ground up. The neighbors start talking to neighbors and they, get a plan together. And that's what I prefer to do, is, hey, we like this ridge, there's some value here. You're coming to me and asking about defensible space. You ever thought about this? And kind of build it from the grassroots, from the ground up. And I think a lot of the trepidation is, what is a shaded field break going to look like? What does it specifically look like? Are we going to have an easement on their property, or who's going to maintain it? All those types of questions come up. And so it's really kind of a balance of building trust, understanding, getting buy-in. And then if you're going to go for grants and such, it's got to be for community benefit, not to benefit the specific landowner. So while occur on private property, it's the benefit. So I think you and I have both seen kind of, different approaches and how this all works. It's very hard though. And I know, Brooke, you had it in your situation as well, where a landowner doesn't want to be involved. And so ultimately, I think there's still value, even if it's just that one landowner that doesn't want to be involved. We just know during a fire, we're going to end up doing it for them, or that might be where the fire might burn more intensely. And we're probably not going to ask for their permission at the same time. So that's, I don't let one landowner hold me up if there's still strategic value in the whole thing. I just know in my mind, that's a weak point for the real fire. So hope that answered your question. But I think it's all about the grassroots, getting neighbors together first, and then coming to the fire department and working together, collaboration. And I can tell you right now that I probably got more projects in the incubation stage than I have the capability or capacity or the funding to even manage. So I just know in the periphery they're working on it, and someday we're going to probably help them and go there. So it's having these types of conversations, always about forest health, always about ecology too. And if it makes sense, yeah, let's go for it. So anyway, thank you.
That's great. That's good. Thanks. That's spot on. We'll work on that fuzzy part, the warm and fuzzy part first, and then if it doesn't go, we'll come in with a hammer, right? That's sometimes the reality. And that's kind of what we're trying to avoid through these collaborative efforts, is trying to build the confidence and show it on the ground so people are more aware of what it actually entails. Brooke and Monica, I wondered if you could speak to the question of costs. I know that each one of you have been working on several different models. You're implementing projects on regional parks land and ag and open space lands. What are you starting to see as far as kind of how it rolls out in the end of the day?
Well, most of the costs that I know come from working over on the Jenner Headlands. So that's owned by the Wildlands Conservancy, and a nonprofit. And while I was there, we brought in a number of different grants to help pay for shaded fuel break work and implementation. So over there, there's a variety of different methods that you can use to implement a shaded fuel break. In terms of mastication, which can be an excavator with a masticating head on the arm of the excavator. That's very effective at reducing the fuels, kind of breaking them up, breaking up that continuity of fuels. And that looks like it's running about $2,700 an acre. out there on the Jenner Headlands. And then in terms of lop and scatter, which is when you send in a crew with chainsaws that are going to be breaking down the material. We use this a lot on areas where there were steep slopes and we couldn't bring in heavy machinery. And so we had to have manual crews go in there with the chainsaws breaking that up. That was running about $1,700 per acre. And then chipping can really be expensive because the chipping process, usually you have to, cut that material, then you have to bring it up to the chipper and then you have to feed it through there. So one way to think about it is the more you have to touch the material, the higher the cost is going to be. And so for that, it was, $5,000 per acre. But we did use that along the roads because we don't want those heavy fuel loads right along the roads. And I think one component that's missed when we talk about implementing these shaded fuel breaks and talking about mastication and lop and scatter is we are breaking up that horizontal and vertical continuity of the fuels, yet the fuels are still there. We're just kind of reorganizing them. And I think Fred and folks at Pepperwood can talk about this, where they were putting in shaded fuel breaks, breaking down the material. A lot of it was left on the ground. They had plans for prescribed fires to then further reduce those fuels. But unfortunately, they weren't able to get to use prescribed fire before a wildfire came through. And in that instance, you've actually created heavier fuel loads on the ground. And so it's important to remember that we can send out crews and masticators, but all that material is still on the ground. So that there has to be a follow-up. The shaded fuel break is just the first step in a very long and continual process. And so people should look at using pile burning. Can be helpful, where you can put some of that material into a pile. You can put some waxy craft paper on top of that to try to keep it dry, let the first couple rains come through, and then you can burn those burn piles and reduce that fuel load. And then of course, we've already talked about prescribed fire, I think is a really important tool. And we see these shaded fuel breaks as really being that first step in trying to set up these properties for the application, efficient and safe application of prescribed fire.
That's an excellent response. Thank you very much, Brooke. Monica, what has been your experience as far as the costs of implementation?
So cost-wise, we are a public agency, and as a county agency, we are subject to prevailing wage requirements for work of this nature, which brings our per acreage costs up a bit. We're also admittedly taking an expensive approach to the work, just with the techniques that we're using. So our costs for crew implementation are running around $5,000 an acre. We have additional costs on top of that for biologists and some of our resource protection mitigations, and of course my staff costs too. To Brooke's point, and I failed to mention in my introduction that our shaded fuel breaks also are serving as future control lines for prescribed burn units. So we have I believe 10 timber prescribed burn units delineated on the Saddle Mountain Preserve. And shaded fuel breaks are part of standard control line prep for burning in timber. So we're that's that kind of that multifunctionality of these treatments. We intentionally did not do much chipping or lop and scatter because I did not want to see a lot of material left on the ground. Having had a lot of experience burning in timber, I sort of have a mental slide for how much of a fuel bed is going to generate sort of unacceptable fire effects from an overstory tree protection standpoint. So we are using piling for future burning as our main treatment, with a little bit of chipping along roadsides where a chipper could be brought through, but we intentionally had the crew keep that chip bed depth to under 2 inches because we don't want to see some of our herbaceous layer completely suppressed in those areas. And we also didn't want to increase the residence time of fire on the land, whether that's during a prescribed burn or a future wildfire. We didn't want to have those heat impacts or potential girdling to our overstory trees and the oaks in that area. So, you know, utilizing hand crews with saws and piling at prevailing wage rates does become costly. We were able to bring in a Coastal Conservancy grant that's covering all of the crew costs, and then we are just providing a match with our staff costs and then our biologists as well.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. Maybe we'll readdress this again, but one of the factors that you had to take into consideration on Saddle is you have borders next to residential homes. And so that kind of limited you had to be a little bit more precise in the planning so that their kind of anxiety was a little bit reduced in some senses. I'm thinking more like Plum Ranch Road, for instance. So let's go to our panel, our other members of the Zoom here. Dee has asked a couple of questions that maybe the whole panel could respond to. I think one of the first questions I saw, Dee, was related to erosion, and what are some of kind of the best practices used by several of you in reducing soil erosion when you're developing these types of prescriptions? Marshall, do you want to start, or Ann?
Yeah, so I'm trying to look back through the chat. What was the specific? I missed it, I think.
Here it is. What is the experience to date of soils and understory disturbance due to mechanical methods?
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm the best from a fire point of view because I'm not a soils expert, but depending on what type of mechanical treatment is being used, whether it's like a track chipper versus a larger, like a Cat 323 type masticator, that's the biggest variability, and then how steep the slope is. So I've seen anything from you can barely tell to wow, what happened here type construction type logging look. So it's really more variable on how you write what slope they're going to be on, what exactly they do. The least damage I've seen is a track chipper. You could barely tell. The most damage I've seen is from a large masticator like a 323. So it's variable, not a yes and no, not a black and white answer. It's but generally the lighter the equipment, less steep the slope, the less damage. So my preferred method, it's been talked about, it's increased cost with using crews, is a hand-fed track chipper. So you have very little vehicle, and to Brooke's point, you're touching the material a lot less. But that's not going to be feasible everywhere because of steep slopes. So anyway, yep, thank you.
Okay. One other question that Dee shared with the group was, are shaded fuel breaks an opportunity to work on invasive plant removal and prevent them from extending their populations to other areas? Does anybody have a response on that?
I take that. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I think that that's potentially, you know, would be a criteria to looking at locating a shaded fuel break where you already have an invasive problem as a way to address that problem. And certainly a criteria for the approach to reducing the fuels is not wanting to be a vector for invasive plants. You know, I think we're seeing, you know, just tremendous explosion of broom up in the upper Mark-West area and pretty much all over the county. You know, addressing the broom problem kind of almost before you do anything else, so that it doesn't become a seed source for your new shaded fuel break, is probably, you know, what needs to happen. And unfortunately, it's been difficult to fund, I think, in the county, how to address the broom. I know that the RCD tried to get a Coastal Conservancy grant for that. I don't know. Does anybody know if they were successful? Anyway, I do think that is an important consideration. And, you know, looking at what is the composition of the understory in the area you're proposing for the fuel break, and how stable is it, and how capable is it of spreading in that area, you know, the plants that you want, how capable are they spreading, and what kind of pest management practices would you need to put in place to have that happen? Because the reducing the fuels is kind of part of the problem, but actually the management of the understory in a lot of ways is even more critical, because it's kind of the long-term stability of the system in terms of erosion control and habitat. And so pushing it toward a mix of native grasses that aren't high fuel, looking at smaller understory plants, and from iris to whatever, yerba buena or something, things that will sustain themselves over time, that can be spread, that provide habitat, I think are pretty critical to think of it as a whole system, like not a garden per se, but the relationship between the understory and the overstory needs to be a long-term one.
Okay, thanks for that, Ann. And then Jason Mills, could you fire away?
Hi there. Yeah, I guess I'd like to talk a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of the actual effects to vegetation when conducting shaded fuel breaks. And something just hit me, a way of describing it as the triple D. Instead of diners, drive-ins, and dives, let's talk about daylighting, disturbance, and Douglas fir. Right. So if we're looking at what happens when you don't do a shaded fuel break, right? A lot of people just look at all the vegetation as biomass and getting it out of there. And if you just start mauling all your trees and opening up that to sunlight, in my opinion, you're going to have more flashy fuel come in and actually increase your long-term management needs to mow that area perpetually forever, not to mention the habitat destruction involved. So I think a lot of times that's not discussed, and working on public and private lands is a little tricky to marry all this stuff. But so daylighting's a big no-no. If you take away the shade, it's really hard to get any understory species to establish that hold water through the summer. So I try to preserve as much shade as possible. Then you get into the disturbance, depending on the equipment, like we're talking masticators and hand crews, you're going to be churning that earth up, and oftentimes stuff doesn't come back. And we're seeing the understory just getting wiped out on the equipment projects with no funds to do any sort of understory restoration once it's done. So disturbance is a big thing. And then the third thing, the Douglas firs. Oh, and disturbance and invasive species. Not only do you have flashy fuels, you have ladder fuels coming in thicker than they were before. So here comes your 15-foot wall of broom. You just spent $300K on it to get a worse vegetation situation in the end. It's just kind of kills me. And then the last one, Douglas firs. Doug firs, they're a native, but they're a way of shifting the vegetation to kind of prevent these crown fires from happening. If you can take all these areas with heavy Doug fir encroachment, prioritize those, start going through and thinning the firs and transitioning it back to hardwood or whatever it was, that's a win-win. And what we're seeing in the areas that have burned over is there's just a ton of standing dead fir. And that big wood can get milled. You can make money off of it. I'm sure Fred can expand on that. And, getting access, that's going to hit your roads and hit your land. And then the little guy, the little firs, you gotta thin them out. That's what we're doing at Saddle Mountain. It's working great. And I think we're building a more resilient forest out there. So just thanks again for the conversation, you guys. Keep up all the great work.
Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate your input. Ellie, what would you like to share?
Yeah, I wish you all had been able to come out to the tours that we did last Saturday and the previous one at OAC and the JC, because we talked a lot about broom, a lot about invasive species, Doug fir disturbance, and how to deal with all that. But I wanted to just bring up the question of invasive species and broom in particular. And we will be, some of the things that Jason just mentioned are super important, and we will be addressing them, and we will be reaching out to Jason and all of you for your comments. But, for broom, for those of you who don't know, the first 2 or 3 years before, it takes 2 or 3 years to become mature and actually create seeds. So if you can actually tackle the broom before it creates a seed bank, you're going to be so far ahead. You're going to be 50 years ahead, because once the seeds start germinating, once it starts producing seeds, then the seeds can live in the soil for 50 years. And Brock pointed that out, that he's been working for 30 years knocking back broom. So one of the very first best practices is to tackle broom before it becomes seed bearing. And we learned so many different techniques. It's the time of year. You can actually mow it if you mow later in the season when the soil is low on water. I won't go into the details, but the question about invasive species is a really big one, and we will be treating it. And maybe I think we just need to do a few of the brown bags as we go along for the forest working group before the handbook comes out.
I think that sounds great. I had the unfortunate experience of working on a community group project on one of our properties, where we took a young soccer team out to harvest a broom. And as we were pulling the stems out of the ground, we could hear the popping of the seeds being released by other plants. So it was definitely not the right time. And I learned a quick experience that you got to go in there when the soils are soft and they're easy to pull. And when hopefully when the plants aren't as mature. If you can get them when they're younger, that's obviously, but it's a lot of work, and there's a lot to learn. Monica, what would you like to share?
Everybody may be very well aware of this, but just, to that point of treating broom when it's young, when you have a fire and you have that big flush of broom that comes in post-fire, that represents a flushing of the seed bank. So you've got that 50-year seed bank. All of a sudden, you've had massive germination of that all at once. So it's it's just such a wonderful opportunity if you have the means and the resources to treat during those first couple of years post-fire. Not only are you getting the plants before they have started to develop seed and contributed more to that seed bank, but you are taking advantage of the work that the fire has done in actually getting rid of some of the existing seed bank. And we've also just, to broom control, we've had pretty good results as long as the broom is still quite small with flaming it in the wet season. That way we can avoid using herbicide. It's takes a little bit more time than spraying, just in terms of somebody standing there with a propane torch, but it's pretty efficient, and it does a really good job of getting rid of those thick flushings that come in.
Some great tools. Lynn, go ahead.
So I'm on my phone for the first time instead of my computer, so I can't find the raise my hand or the chat. But I would also really add to that, we're seeing each year since the Tubbs fire, more and more star thistle. And there's a lot of discussion about broom and maybe a little less about star thistle. So as we move forward with other discussions or focuses, that's another thing that we're really struggling with.
Yeah, that's a good observation. Yeah. Fred, you've had a lot of experience with managing your forest and ag and open space forests. What are some of the key lessons you've learned as far as both that question about invasive plants as well as kind of your basics shaded fuel break structure? We've gone through a lot of different design models, and what do you think is some of the lessons you've learned?
Okay, I got to say that the Plum Creek Road, Plum Ranch Road, is the best example of piles for burning that I've seen, and it's been really complete and inclusive. And I think they did a great in there. Similarly, and that's under conifers and oaks. Pepperwood has done a great job. Devon is a great resource at this point. They've taken it to heart. But the cost is 50% dragging stuff plus 50% cutting stuff. So it doesn't double your cost so much as half your speed to move through it. Relative to broom, absolutely what people are saying about it coming back like nobody's business is so true, particularly in areas where you had to develop seed bank. And I'm working with NRCS and calling in the herbicides as well as manual treatment. over time, broom does get shaded out, but that time on burned areas is going to be a long time from now. So that experience, plus I guess a strong belief in getting stuff into the ground or burned as fast as possible. I think burning the shaded fuel breaks is a really good idea, especially with organized fuels. I think taking the heavy woods from the shaded fuel breaks and putting them in as bumpers, if you will, as brow logs down the slope for non-commercial species makes a lot of sense. And I like the idea of getting wood covered with soil. The Jenner Headlands, the Wildlands Conservancy has just bought a forest mulcher out there, which is an attachment on the front of a essentially a front loader, and it pushes material into the ground, and it can go through 6-inch or 4-inch Douglas fir and push it into the ground to slow down. It's highly ground disturbing, but it really reduces the danger on the ground and turns it into more of a fern field in the right situation. So it's like a masticator, except it pushes into the ground. And I think in some situations that's a really good idea. I am still not sold on the idea that a shaded fuel break will stop a fire. I'm concerned about that, and I'm concerned that it is a false medicine that we are taking at times, a placebo, rather than an actual cure. Sure, they look good. Sure, they're going to work for a ground fire. So use that opportunity for the ground fire. But when we get 20% humidity, I can't count on any of these things not having tree contact at the top and pushing through. So I would say the shaded fuel breaks, as Jason was saying, it's a balance between how much shade you get on the ground to reduce further sprouting and how many trees do you leave standing in order to limit the spread of a ground fire.
Mhm.
So I'll stop. I'll exhale now. Kim?
Let's go to Dee's next question, and then Adriana had a question in the text or in the chat. So go ahead, Dee.
This is such a rich conversation. It's just so important. I hope that more landowners can hear this variety and the breadth of experience and ideas. I'm wanting to know if anyone has heard of engineers working on designing new equipment that will be less harmful to the forest, land, and plants. I'm hoping that one of the things about workforce is to have that type of job be part of our mix, because we need new types of equipment. So I'm wondering, does anybody know of anything that's going on that way?
Marshall, you're probably most familiar with a lot of the tools out there, or Fred?
Yeah, I know there is some stuff coming out almost every year, every day. And I don't know if that's why Ben also has his hand up. We've seen some innovative stuff. I know I get photos of stuff that's even from Lake County that people are using. I don't know from that specific question, is it less damaging to land and the plants? That's what I don't know about. However, there is new things that can go on steeper slopes now. They have huge tires, they dissipate some of the weight. But I don't know to that specific question. I don't have expertise or any assessment on that specific question. So,
Yeah,
but maybe
me,
Ben might comment on that.
That's the essence of a creative solution, to have it be less harmful to the land and the plants.
There's also, just to throw in, a logger offered me yesterday a feller buncher with a masticator head. and that allows it to go on steeper slopes. It's a heavy equipment. I consider munching slash into the ground as part of fuel reduction. But if we like mastication, it is a good way to reduce the fuel to the ground. Again, I'm worried about high winds blowing that stuff as embers.
That sounds good. Chief Nichols, thank you for joining us. Would you like to share something?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on Fred's concerns about the feeling like shaded fuel brakes are the final, that there is no one solution out there that will deal with critical fire weather behavior. But the thing I want to leave with the group is that the current state of fire crews or hand crews to fight wildland fires in the state of California is abysmal. We're trying to get those resources staffed up, but that's a generational type lift that we're taking on right now. So Marshall and I, during the Walbridge fire and during the Walbridge is the best example. So Cal Fire CDF used to maintain McCrae Ridge and Pool Ridge as fuel brakes into the 80s. Maybe as early as the early 90s, but when the Black Mountain Conservation Camp went away, that was not something we could maintain. So had those been in place for the Walbridge fire, that was something that Marshall would have used in a heartbeat to fire from, to be able to contain that fire. We're not allowing a fire to burn unchecked into the shaded fuel brake and expect it to hold. We're using that as a pre-fire line construction to utilize either firing operations from that, or Plum Ranch being the great example is that, you know, anybody who's been on that road knows that the slope below that road, below that fuel brake, shaded fuel brake, is steep enough that without any sort of continuing modification, the vegetation down below that, it's never going to hold. But the shaded fuel brake is the side of the box for a prescribed fire introduction to reduce that deadened down and the built up fuel loading below that fuel brake. So a combination of the shaded fuel brake followed on behind with prescribed fire not only makes a more resilient landscape, but it also makes a much more effective tool and a much more wide range of fires that will be effective on, knowing that not every fire is going to be able to be checked up by a shaded fuel brake.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've really learned and shared with a lot of different groups when we advocate for a shaded fuel brake. I don't think anyone's of the mind that this is going to stop wildfire events, especially considering the types of events we've had in this county via Tubbs and Nuns, which were largely wind driven. If the 101 can't stop a fire, there's not very many shaded fuel brakes that are going to stop a fire at that scale. So I think we have to be realistic about the purpose of the shaded fuel brake. And the things that I've learned from Ben and Marshall is just like, this is really a great opportunity to have access that's prescribed, and we know how to get to these concentric lines away from a fire and allow crews to do the best they can to slow the fire down. So if you have a shaded fuel brake, you now have an opportunity to get crews in there to do backfires, to do treatments, or have slurry drops by along that line that helps to, again, reduce the intensity of the burn at that particular moment. But those are great comments by both Ben and also the concern that everyone thinks that the panacea is the shaded fuel brake. And I think we all understand that it is not. Let me see. We have a few floating hands up. I'm not sure if there's a new question or is anyone else have a shared idea? Go ahead, Brook.
Oh, I just wanted to kind of dovetail on what Ben was talking about. You know, that if we can get these shaded fuel brakes in, and then we can use them as control lines to then prescribe to apply prescribed fire in between the roads, the control lines. We're working on reducing the fuel loading of our landscape, which, as everyone knows, it's just tremendous. There's a tremendous amount of fuels out there. The shaded fuel break itself is not necessarily going to stop a fire, but a shaded fuel break with then prescribed fire used in between these shaded fuel breaks is going to reduce that fuel load, so that when one of the things that can happen is if a wildfire does move through that unit that has been burned, there's going to be less fuel there for that fire to burn. So hopefully it will burn with less severity, less intensity, and there will be more trees, more vegetation that are going to survive that wildfire event, instead of reducing the entire forest stand to ash and we start over at ground zero trying to build a forest ecosystem. So that's one of the things that I look at, is try to build in more wildfire resilience using a number of these different tools, not necessarily stopping a wildfire, but allowing and giving the landscape more resiliency to come back after a wildfire.
That's an excellent comment. Thank you, Brooke. I appreciate that. Monica, how about you? What would you like to share?
Yeah, just to the point that Kim was making, I think there's a real and very understandable, psychological desire among the community for some action that is going to establish and restore a sense of safety, particularly, given how traumatized people have been by wildfires in recent years. For shaded fuel breaks or for any fuels treatment approach or prescribed burning, I am always trying to caution people that they need to be patient with this process. As urgent as the situation is, and as much as it's calling for immediate action, it's not, if you're dealing with 100 years of absence of disturbance and changed forest stand conditions and fuel loading, you're not going to be able to go in with a single project or a single treatment and get that back to an equilibrium state. You're not going to be able to do it in 2 or 3. This is a decades-long process. It's going to require multiple treatments, and that can be really daunting for people to think about. But we do have to start somewhere, and so I just am always trying to encourage people to keep that in mind, that they need to commit to this long term, and just understand that it's going to be a very long-term process before they see the outcome that they envision on the land.
That's an excellent comment. It sounds like you're channeling your inner Ben Nichols, as he's shared that comment so many times, and with communities that we work with, that took us 100 years to get here. We're not going to solve it overnight. And I learned, I had a conversation with Sasha Berleman just the other day, and she was raising that same issue about the importance of helping to landowners to understand their responsibility of managing their lands. And the concept of not treating a piece of property is conservation. I think that's kind of a misnomer. We need to be proactive in what we do to our lands, and in which we can provide those tools. I think that's part of the discussion that we really tried to roll into here. Carleon, thanks for joining us. We're kind of wrapping up our session on shaded fuel breaks. Do you have anything you'd like to share today?
Well, I was just gonna ping in and say how important it is to remind property owners that given that everything Monica said, thank you, Monica, that was so spot on. And it's that expectation, everybody's expecting somebody to be able to fix this problem, and we can't. And one of the things that really can be fixed is structures and defensible space, which will stand a good chance of at least reducing home destruction. And I just wish that wasn't an asterisk always on the conversation, as it mostly seems to be, because that is really, I think, if property owners are interested in not having their houses burned down, that's the first thing they should focus on.
That's fair. Certainly a valuable part of this question about how we start working from the house out and Sorry, folks, might have frozen up. Let me see, looks like we have Dee and Ellie.
Yes. Can we ascertain the effect of burning the homes to the amount of chemicals that they have stored inside them? I always think that that must be a pretty big factor, but I don't know. And I wonder if anybody has analyzed that.
I didn't catch that full question, but does somebody want to respond?
I think the question in summary was how much chemicals or bad stuff's coming off buildings burning. Also, we can throw vehicles in there and other infrastructure, even just irrigation pipes in a vineyard. I'm unaware of any study, but I would definitely acknowledge it does exist. So I don't even know how you'd quantify all that unless you did some rough modeling. But I'm unaware of, to get to the original question, I'm unaware of any research or any statistics on that.
I'm thinking more of the chemicals that we each, as you have stored in your garage, in your kitchen, your bathroom. That's the type of fuel that I'm concerned about that's not being addressed, or at least I don't know it's being addressed.
I recognize that, and same thing. I don't think there's any good studies or science out there on that.
Dee, I know that someone, and I don't have any specifics, but I know that there were some organizations looking at water quality sampling after the 2017 fires and looking for some of those inputs, but I don't have any data or anything to point you towards. Maybe somebody is more aware of who really was at the helm of that.
I know that the Forest Service has a project going where they're looking at that stuff, but
And
I don't know where they're at with it.
The air quality is a factor that it just goes up there somewhere.
Yeah, right. I think Caitlin Cornwall had some, was starting to dig into that question because they were really trying to do a lot of restoration protection of Sonoma Creek. Maybe we can reach out to her. Ellie, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, kind of taking off on what Caroline and others have said about encouraging landowners to get involved. And I just have some encouraging information that we've been doing this pilot in West County with some money from Fire Safe Sonoma, specifically reaching out to landowners to give them education about best practices. And we've got, just in West County, an overwhelming response. And so, and I also just was in a meeting with our Assemblyman Jim Wood yesterday, and it just, to me, and I'm also channeling Roberta McIntyre, Fire Safe Sonoma, which her statement is, we need more money for content and content delivery to homeowners. We've been working on defensible space with Resilient Landscapes Coalition, and we just have a tremendous amount of interest in that. But now we're going beyond the 100 feet, and we need to get videos out. We need to get the handbook out. We need to get workshops out. I think we're gonna have a really positive response to this, but people don't know most of what we're talking about. And more than 80% of all of Sonoma County is privately owned, unlike Marin, which is, I meant privately owned, unlike Marin, which is publicly owned. So I'm just putting a plug in for, making sure that we get the information out to all landowners. The Forest Working Group obviously is trying to target landowners and, public, private and public, but there's so much more work to do. And I'm really happy that Kim and Adriana are applying for funding to do more of these workshops in the spring. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. We need to reach out in every way we can. And I just appreciate the work that this group is doing.
Back at you. Thanks, Ellie. Judy, do you have something to share? I'm not hearing. Judy, are you speaking or on mute right now?
Okay. Yes, I said I wasn't going to turn the video on because I'm still having an internet problem.
with my connection, but I just wanted to build on what Monica was saying about, it's more than just one thing, more than one treatment. Starting back with the Creighton Ridge fire in 1978, we did the reforestation. We have our road crews up here. Our HOAs have road crews who have been doing vegetation management. We have volunteer groups who have put in thousands of hours of doing fuels management along the sides of the roads. And now, we got these grants, one from the county and one from CAL FIRE. County grant is already in progress, starting the phase 1 of the shaded fuel break on Fort Ross Road. And then we'll be starting the CAL FIRE project next year on another 7 miles of shaded fuel breaks. But that's been, 50 years in planning practically, from one fire to, and then all of the workshops and community speaking out, having Carol Leon come and talk about defensible space, having the Forest Working Group participate in our forest stewardship, workshops, and then, forming the Sonoma Coast Collaborative with our communities between Cazadero and the Sea Ranch and the Mendocino border. But this has been, almost 50 years in the planning, and we're just now, really getting a substantial amount of money to, to apply some of these treatments that we're talking about today. And, and there's still a lot of work ahead. And so in our community, we're looking at these shaded fuel breaks primarily as evacuation routes. Yes, for trying to minimize the risk of a fire and serve as, containment areas. But in order to engage hundreds of landowners as we have, they want to know, how is this going to benefit me? And we have, so our fuel breaks are really geared in the community as helping to create safer evacuation routes. And after 2017, we have, so much more buy-in than we did prior, because now these fires are touching homes, touching people's hearts, and, and their space of home. So I just wanted to, to add that, this has been in the works for almost 50 years, and we're just now getting here.
And, the term comes that, the Coast Ridge Forest Council is our poster child, but maybe you're our poster adult by this time. So we certainly recognize all the efforts that you guys have led and serve as a great example of what it takes to get all this stuff together. It's 12 noon, and I really want to thank everybody who participated in our panel today. You guys crushed it. Really appreciate all the experience you've been able to provide us. I think it was a really good dialogue. I agree. I wish there were more landowners involved in this conversation, but Adrienne and I will try to post this and really try to reach out to folks to be able to watch this video. So thank you very much for participating today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. All right, take care.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.